but they would always say to me, hey, you're so hardworking. You're achieving so much. You're doing so much for your daughters, but you just don't love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what does that even mean? Like, I didn't like, of course I love, look at me, like I'm this, and I just won this award, and I'm the, I'm on, I did a keynote at the, XYZ association, of course, and I just didn't get it. Like, what does that mean? I don't love myself. And it took me a long time to understand what that actually meant.
In today's episode, we're joined by the dynamic Alex Atwood, a seasoned entrepreneur, psychedelic coach, changemaker, and host of the Alchemist Lounge Podcast. With 20 years of experience and 4 startups under his belt, Alex has a wealth of wisdom to share. Dive in as we discuss his transformative journey from the hospitality sector to becoming an advocate for well-being and wellness in the industry. Get ready to explore the power of love and self-discovery through psychedelics, and how Alex's spiritual background and experiences have shaped his unique perspective on religion and community. Join us as we touch on the significance of music and psychedelic ceremonies, the delicate art of leadership, and how Alex helps organizations and leaders unlock their highest potential while promoting a healthy work environment. Delve into topics like yoga, meditation, microdosing, creativity, and mindfulness in this insightful conversation that's sure to inspire and enlighten. Tune in now and see you on the other side. Welcome, Alex, to Leadership-adelics. So good to have you here after being a guest on your podcast.
Oh, I am absolutely honored to be here, Sébastien. It's good to see you.
The honor is mine. So to prepare for the interview, I was reviewing your bio. And it just reminded me a little bit of Warren Buffett, who, like, when he was a kid, he was like doing something with pinballs and I was looking at your story and I was like, oh my God, he started selling gumballs in elementary school. So yeah,
it was a candy addiction is what it was. And I had to feed it no matter what. I actually had a group of friends that were entrepreneurs in their own light. And we found that there was a delta between what the kids would pay in the lunchroom and what we could buy the bubblegum and the candy for at the store. So we went and bought the candy. We determined our markup, which is basically enough to buy comic books, during the weekend. And that's what we would do. And then I think the real thing was we made a lot of friends. That was what it was, because it was like, there were certain kids that just couldn't eat certain candies because their parents wouldn't let them. So anytime you don't let someone do something, they want more and more. So I would always get those requests for certain like candies, and it was interesting. It was like dipping my toes into candy capitalism.
That's lovely. And I saw you had 2 daughters. So, like, do you see some of that in your daughters? Are they selling candy at their school?
Well, they're older now. So my I have a 24, 21-year-old and about to be 22, believe it or not. So they they had candy addictions, but I wouldn't let them get anywhere near the sort of distribution channels I had. Seriously.
I love it.
Because I was paying for the braces at that point. So and all the dental work. So it changes up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I've got that going on right now. So
you get it.
It's interesting because there's nothing that motivates you to stop eating candies than the dentist trying to drill the cavity out.
Yeah.
And you can tell the kids about it, but until they experience it, it's really not the same thing.
Yeah. I think they learn like how all of their desires have consequences. And I learned that, the hard way too, and you never stop really learning that as you go through life. Right.
Yeah.
And as long as you learn from that, you know what they say, experience is the best teacher, right?
Yeah.
So once you experience that sharp element in your mouth and those drilling sounds and potentially hearing some sort of bone matter, then I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I tried to describe that to my 14-year-old in as many gruesome details as I could, but I could see that until he experiences it, he's still not there. But Anyway, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves because I could jump from there to psychedelics, but I'm not going to do that because I kind of want to introduce you a little better, and I give you an opportunity to tell us about what you've got going on, who you are, not necessarily going deep in the philosophy of who we are. We'll do that through the whole show.
Yeah. Well, one more point on the dental pieces, and this will be a connection to psychedelics, is that in my first ayahuasca journey, and maybe some people listening to this may have had similar experiences, but they call it psychic surgery, and specifically psychic dental surgery. And I think in my first experience, there was probably 7 or 8 people that actually had an experience, actual, like, beings in their mouths doing psychic surgery. So if anyone listening to this has heard that, that's actually something that's happened quite a bit. But so
now you just it's like you give me some bait here and you just hang it in front of me. It's funny because you did the third wave certification with microdosing. And I know it's Paul, right?
Paul Austin.
Yeah, Paul Austin, and he loves comparing microdosing to getting or I think he compares it to dental work. Or maybe it's like you have to do your cleanup every 6 months. And I don't know if it's a macrodose he's referring to. I forgot. I haven't listened to him for a while, or the microdose. But I like how we're all getting back to the dental work. So
it's polishing. It's polishing.
Yeah.
It's getting in there. It's getting those that plaque off. I mean, every day, every year, we go through all sorts of circumstances and life situations that cause, like a residue, like a plaque, and so you get, you just work through those. But yeah, and in terms of me, to move away from dental work for just a moment, so I've had, in terms of my career, I've had a pretty long career in the hospitality industry, the staffing industry, in managing like large teams, large groups of workforce, specifically on the service level of things. And I started in the staffing industry back in the late 90s when there was a Y2K crisis and things that the entire world looked like it was going to, potentially end at midnight. And so I came out of college in 1996, and then my family had been in the recruiting industry, so I jumped in and started to build like teams at a time when there was just so much possibility, and things were just really booming at that time in terms of what the potential of the internet was, much less where we are today, which with Web3. So that's where I started my career, and the one element that was always present was that I was working with people and lots of groups of people and people that were doing a lot of service level jobs. So all of the platforms that we built and all the workforce management systems that we were a part of all had to do with people that were on the front lines of particular industries doing that sort of work. So that I remember there was some times that I would work with various shelters and organizations that were really supporting people that needed it in the community. And that's kind of where the light turned on. I remember there was I was in a homeless shelter, and I was doing a workshop on job readiness and job training. And I remember a woman, she might have been, I don't know, maybe 25, 24 years old. She was there with her maybe 4 or 5 year old daughter. And at the time I had daughters around her age. And they were living in the shelter, and she had all these little books there, and her mom was just like looking at me, like really wanting to learn about what she could do to be able to, resonate with employers. And I just kind of sat with her, and she was very nervous, and sort of talked to her about how like connecting with them and, being transparent with them. It's fine. You are where you are. And the fact that you're there, be yourself. They'll want to hire you. You've worked hard. And she had just been out of a culinary program. She'd really worked hard. And when I left there that day, and I could just tell, like, it was like a load off her shoulders. When I left that, I was like, this is really what lights me up, just, working with people and seeing something click. But I didn't, then I started, to build more companies, and didn't necessarily take the time to pay attention to that that sort of internal drive of mine until more recently when I started to get into more of the organizational well-being space and transformational space. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. But that was sort of what I did in my career. And there was a time when I really felt that separating, whatever I did in my career from what I did personally was something that was important to me. Like career, I think they call it work-life balance. Career stays here, life stays here. And in the last 7 years, I've started to just have everything sort of conflate, and it's worked out very, very well.
Love it.
For my companies and for my coaching practice, and yeah.
What was the tipping point?
The tipping point was probably, I think it started in 2015 when I got involved with this program called the Landmark Forum. I think I mentioned that to you before. I may have, but they're one of the oldest, you call it the self-help, self-improvement, transformational work that started out as something called EST training back in San Francisco in the mid to late 60s by name of Werner Erhard. And that eventually, through machinations, evolved into the Landmark Forum. So I sat there in the Landmark Forum, which is a group of people, about 30 people, and one person called the Landmark Leader. And it's just conversations that you have. And by the end of the 3 days, I mean, I was like set on a new track. And that then led into, a meeting with Paul Austin and starting with a group called One Heart Journeys, which I was part of sort of their inaugural journey, and then transitioning into psychedelic coaching and certification. And most recently working with some really interesting, again, in the world of sort of conflating my careers, hospitality is going through a huge transformation now too, where now we're looking at how important well-being, wellness is. The hospitality industry was really decimated in terms of the hybrid work, and sort of the gatherings have possibly changed forever. Yeah. But lifestyle is still something that is very real. People want to go to places that make them feel at home and comfortable, and they feel more productive when they're around others. And so they're not necessarily all crammed into an office these days. And so there's so many different organizations popping up. And I'm just supporting one in particular that's opening in Shenandoah. So lots of just cool stuff happening around this space. And being a entrepreneur, there's a lot of opportunities for those who have a passion to create and have a passion for wanting to make a change, a positive change in the world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Going back to that tipping point event where you connected with Landmark. I mean, how was your life before that? Like, you had that work-life balance. I mean, what was it like if you compare it to now?
Well, it was it wasn't as rich. I guess it was very transactional to a great degree. There was lots of things to do and not enough time to do them. And I would continue to add more to-do items on my list and knock out those items. And a result of that would be some sort of modicum of success, by either knocking out an item or learning from how I wasn't able to accomplish that task. So it was a series of tasks, a series of goals, and a series of, paths to go from to get to achieving those goals.
Did you have stress management tools then, or like how are you coping with because I see a lot of entrepreneurs, their solution to adding more to their plates is using a lot of tools that allow them to add more to their plates, and they keep adding more up until a certain point. So I'm curious what tools you were using then.
Wow, that's a really good question. I learned how to practice TM from an ex-girlfriend in 2009. But it was a tool in a toolkit that I didn't use consistently. And that's sort of the story of before 2015. I kept commitments to other people as if they were, the most important thing ever, but I didn't keep the commitments to myself. And I did not recognize how important taking care of myself and really just honoring myself. And what's interesting is I was a single father of two daughters, and they lived with me, and I didn't have much of a dating life for the first decade. And then when I started to date again, I had a lot of like, and I only had a few actual girlfriends, but they would always say to me, "Hey, you're so hardworking, you're achieving so much, you're doing so much for your daughters, but you just don't love yourself." Mm-hmm. And I said, what does that even mean? Like, I didn't like, of course I love, look at me, like I'm this, and I just won this award, and I'm the, I'm on, I did a keynote at the, XYZ association, of course, and I just didn't get it. Like, what does that mean? I don't love myself. And it took me a long time to understand what that actually meant. And so I think like the psychedelic element and the ability to go deep after you've started on a path of curiosity is very powerful. And then you can ask yourself questions like, do I love myself? Like, what does that mean? And just dig in. And a simple question like that, really, I did not understand it, because everything that I knew is like loving myself was something outside of what that actually means.
Yeah. So answering the question of loving yourself, how did that come about? I mean, was there psychedelics involved? Like you brought that in, like what was the process?
I don't know if, do most of your listeners are familiar with the psychedelic experience?
Oh yeah, I mean the show is Leadership-adelics, and the Adelics is
yeah. So that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. So being in the psychedelic, being in journey, being in sort of a ceremony, there's an intention that I would always bring in with me, and there was just a lot of discussion with people that were close to me about. You need to take care of yourself more, love yourself. That's something that absolutely is necessary. And I knew that. So I went into ceremony with that. Like, how do I do that? And it wasn't a straight answer from, from beyond. Yeah. It was more literally just me, like literally hugging myself and like, just showing myself some compassion. But having that happen then really allowed me to understand how I could show others like that same compassion and reciprocate that way. And now in my business life, I'm still an active CEO and entrepreneur. I'm still in that world of capitalism. It's almost a secret weapon. It's not almost, it is a secret weapon if you look at it in a capitalistic sense, because you have an like unlimited amount of stability that is just so necessary when you're leading a company in an uncertain marketplace, and so many things could happen, and so many people rely on you, from investors to employees to colleagues to partners. And when you can build that resilience, when you have a practice and you really trust yourself and you show yourself compassion, you get perspective and you're able to achieve so much more. And you're able to do so when needed, which is really key, right? You can call up, the energy you need. It takes time to cultivate that, but it, it's practice, and it's amazing. It makes life incredible.
Yeah. So again, the loving yourself. This is something I went through myself. Very similar timeline to, which is kind of funny. A lot of synchronicity here. But one of the things I noticed is, with psychedelics, it's like, and I don't know how that was for you, but the definition of love really broadens. And all the different types of love, different ways of loving people, loving yourself. And loving yourself, especially as a man, I think a single dad or somebody who's taken a lot. That's hard. That's hard, especially if you haven't been brought up. And I don't know how you've been brought up, but like in a emotionally, I don't know, mature or intelligent way, or sense. I don't know how to put it, but like, what do you think it's related to that it's so hard for us to love ourselves?
Well, I think part of it is this like this conflation of ego, where possibly thinking of loving yourself is somehow showing up as you think others want you to show up. In other words, not being necessarily true to yourself and continuing to posture based on what you feel the others want to see, which almost always isn't true, doesn't allow you to sort of creates a dissonance, like a disconnection from you. So you're wearing your, whatever, hat you have on today, and that hat requires you to communicate a certain way or to build relationships how you feel will best serve whoever is there, and that disconnection happens, and you can't necessarily connect who you're kind of showing up as and who you really are. It's like a lack of integrity of some sort. And I think that divide maybe gets a little bit bigger. That was my experience, right? So as a young sort of capitalist entrepreneur type of person, I thought I had to be a certain way. I needed to and sometimes you really do, depending upon your audience. That's kind of the way, and things are shifting, but that's the way things definitely were and continue to be. So you don't really get too many opportunities to love yourself. And sometimes when you say, "Hey, I love myself," it's like, oh, you're looking in a mirror or something, and you're just,
are you a narcissist?
Yeah, exactly. You're a narcissist, and I think that's where the big issue, because I was thinking, well, if I love myself, doesn't that make me a narcissist?
No.
Well, no, it doesn't. And like really kind of digging through that was a massive discovery for me. And then when we talk about love, one practice I put in place a few years ago was when I had a conflict, or I had anyone that I had any sort of resentment or any sort of anything for, and I happen to be in a conversation with that person, or have to sort of somehow collaborate with that person, I would tell that person that I love them as in my head as I'm talking to them, and it really worked. It really did. I would say in my head, I love you, I love you, I love you, in many different ways.
I love you too, Alex.
I love you. Yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was actually kind of a hack that I would use, because I would show up in an entirely different way in that conversation, even though my language may have been similar, or the words I was using, the way I was saying things, there was a shift. And so I noticed that there was more receptivity from the other end.
So as you were, well, actually, before I get to that, were you always that spiritually connected, or is this something that actually kind of evolved also on a similar timeline?
So I grew up in a Muslim household, Shiite Muslim, and my father's side of the family, and I didn't really have much connection to my father or his side of the family at all. Actually, I just reconnected with my half brother after 35 years yesterday, so that's interesting. But I had
congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, but so I had this interesting culture around me where I would, like, most of the growing up in the US around the time I did, most of the celebrations around religion were Christmas and Easter and all of that. And that's what at the time, most of the schools would celebrate those. And so I would be a part of those. And my family would also celebrate those to a certain degree. But my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, they would always get up, and pray 5 times a day. And so I would see them praying all of the time. So to me, religion seemed like a set of rules that you needed to do, specifically the Muslim religion. It was like, that's a lot to do. And it didn't really connect to me in a spiritual way necessarily. Although I think there's a sense of community around the religion that is absolutely connecting and spiritual. But it didn't really land on me until, I think it really landed on me through psychedelics, honestly. And, like the really true connection to spirit. But it's always been there. So it's not as if I didn't know about it. It just kind of got illuminated a little bit more.
Did that change your perspective on religion or how to approach religion?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you believe in a higher power. That happens, pretty quickly. For me, at least, it did. And then you just really notice the thread between not just religions, but cultures and communities, and just the humanity of it all. And you see different bumper stickers and slogans. Some just, God is love, Jesus is love, all of these different things you kind of see. And there's a real resonance to them now, right? Like, you read things and you just kind of pass by them as, just step over things. But now they, if I really look at that really resonates with me now. Right. And it's, again, it goes back to what we first talked about. It's experiencing it. The psychedelic experience is much different than something you might read or something you might be told by your parents or a clergyman or something like that. It's something you actually are a part of, which completely changes things.
Yeah. No, well said. And we had to bring it back to experiencing it. I mean, that was a very purposeful discussion. But it's the feeling the love, feeling the experience, feeling that connection. And it's interesting to then revisit religion after that, because it's like, well, did it used to be this way? Did it evolve? And did people get disconnected from the source? Or are there some people who actually, get into similar states, and are able to have a spiritual religious life, which I'm sure there are. I just don't know. I'm just very curious about that subject. I don't want to judge and get in hot waters here. I love the sense of community you brought up too. It's so important. Even religion, psychedelics as well. You talked about One Heart too, which is big on community.
Big time. I actually just came a couple of weeks ago from something called the Love Burn, which is a regional Burning Man event in South Florida, right about 10 minutes outside of Miami. And what's interesting is the night that the Saturday night at this Love Burn, there was something, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's called Mahashrivrati. And it's and I follow Sadhguru, and I follow his social media, and I saw this massive event where everyone in this particular community was staying up the entire night, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, and having a festival the entire night, because sitting up and meditating allowed for a certain type of energy on this particular night at this particular place. So there was all sorts of entertainment and all sorts of interesting things happening. And at the same time that was happening, I was around this community, this Burning Man community, which had people were obviously staying up all night, but there was this immersive art, and the Love Burn was a wedding that originally started as a wedding and turned into an anniversary, I think about 20 years ago. And so every year they celebrate love and they celebrate an anniversary. So all of the art there is dedicated to love. There was an art exhibit that was dedicated to the honeybee, and such detail and meticulous time was taken in this shrine to bees. And when you see that level of love and commitment and detail inside a community, there's a spiritual element there when people come together and they create art and they create music and they do that just for the service of others in a community, that to me is very spiritual. And that was also readily available in whether it's a mosque that I may have attended when I was young or church on Easter. It was that sense of community coming together, supporting something outside of the individualistic needs, supporting something that was bigger than everyone else, right? And so for me, that's really where I found like comfort and spirituality. And that's where the conflation of like religion and so much of these other sort of spiritual type communities really sort of comes together.
And a lot of your work is about equipping people with those tools, right?
Right.
That's the topic of your podcast, unleashing the human potential.
Yeah.
Then I'm curious, in your case, what are some of, you mentioned TM, you mentioned love, we touched on microdosing. What are some of those tools that and rituals that you have developed kind of over the years to help you unleash your potential?
Well, yeah. So I have I do something physical every day. I do some sort of 1 hour of physical activity outside, and a lot of people do that, and I think that's a definite priority for anyone. I've also taken on like some work involved with sound and with music and with healing, and I've kind of dabbled in the past. So I've at one time I fancied myself a drummer, and this was years ago. And so that sort of percussive drum rhythm has sort of been pervasive. And growing up, two of my uncles played santur and played in all sorts of interesting like cultural events. So most recently, I've sort of taken some time every single day to work with sound in one way or another. Oh, yeah. So whether that's like, playing some percussive instrument sort of in an improvisational way for a period of time, or working on something that like utilizes my creative side, sound or music. And I'm putting together a really interesting group of musicians now, and really focusing in on the sound and musical elements, which are just so important in ceremonial space.
Yeah.
How can we combine visuals and sound for an experience that could, enhance the psychedelic component, but potentially also be a medicine within itself? So it's really interesting, and it's based in, all sorts of different really interesting professional musicianship. So we have, some professional bass players that have played on the road with, bands that I'm sure you've heard of. Some of the folks that founded the Blue Man Group, which is really popular. One of the founders is part of what we're doing, and the thread is they've all gone through and they all work with psychedelics in one way or another for transformational purposes. So there's so many different machinations of how this work shows up, and my rituals are like really creative depots, I guess. So I can go in and do that. And something that's really helped, like a really pragmatic thing I do is I every day, and I've done this, is I take a cold shower. It's just easy. It's easier than it's easier than diving into ice somewhat.
Yeah.
And it wakes me up, and I quit caffeine completely.
Oh, that's interesting. Funny because so this brings me back to Wim Hof and meeting the guy and spending a week with him. And I didn't know who he was before I met him, and then I spent a week with him and his family, and he's pro cold bath, cold shower. It's a very gentle teacher, but he loves coffee too. And he loves coffee. So it's funny that got you off coffee. But I mean, it's a multi-purpose tool. It can do a lot of things, but
it can do a lot. Yeah. Well, I never, coffee made me tired in a lot. It's really strange. If I would drink coffee, I would just get more and more tired. But I just felt the need to do it because I was around. And so I said, I need something that actually works for me. And so I realized, cold works for me. And Wim Hof is exactly where I started that journey as well. You know, when you read Wim Hof and you understand what he does, it's superhuman in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you want to emulate that.
Yeah, no, it's very hardcore, and but he's also a very gentle teacher. Like I remember we did a cold bath with him, and for me it was really hurting. Like the cold was really hurting, like all the way down to my bones. And everybody else was like, no, this is, they were right in. I was like, I went right in and I was like, no, my bones are hurting. And Wim was like, I can't do his accent, but it was like, no, like, I know your body type, take it easy, get out and just be gentle. Like, and so many teachers nowadays are like, no, like, I mean, it's changing, but there's a lot of like, no pain, no gain. But Wim, who's doing some really, intense things, still was able to retain that very gentle hand, which for me, and he cares a lot, and he's got a huge heart with kids, and so it's nice to see that, and teachers and people who are dealing with that level of intensity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just being gentle with yourself, and your body is telling you something, so it's best to listen.
Yeah. Music. So you brought up music. That's one of my favorite topics. How do you use music with you mentioned you're getting a group to play music and psychedelics. How do you have you experienced yourself playing music on psychedelics?
Yes, I have actually. I don't know if I was playing that well, which is kind of the impotence for us wanting to like really, practice.
Yeah.
But yes, there's been a few ceremonies where there's been open, sort of like an open
mic
area. Yeah, open mic. There you go. And I played the harmonica. I played the guitar. We sang, and it's beautiful. It's celebratory. It's wonderful. And there is definitely a coming together, in any, whether it's in psychedelic ceremony or not. But with psychedelics though, there's just such a strong correlation to music and sound, and it really does in a lot of ways define the journey, and support the journey, and frame the journey.
Yeah.
And so those elements are something that I'm now looking to work with others to see how we can synthesize those into really creating an experience that's immersive, but also is something that is transformational at the same time. And so it's really interesting, and just this work is just satisfying and nourishing on so many levels.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's just combining all the different parts of my life to just create one beautiful tapestry, as opposed to trying to segment and bifurcate everything. That doesn't work out that well. Not for me.
That's wonderful. How did it feel when you were playing harmonica? Like how are you connecting with the music as a creator?
It felt incredible. It felt emotional. And the improvisation, the thing is, and I'll tell you, the improvisational aspect of making music is something that takes a lot of cultivating and time in order to do it well. It just does. You really have to know your instrument, and you have to know what you're doing, right? But there's some sense of something in ceremony that allows you to sort of tune in. Now, whether I've actually listened to parts of what I played later on, because I was like, and that's kind of where it's like, okay, I think this is great, and I understand the emotion. Let me polish this up a bit. Let's put something in there that is both resonating with me, and we can make improvisational, but at the same time, can just provide a level of excellence. So, that's what that is. But playing music in ceremony is absolutely something that is inspiring for me. Have you felt that way when you're in the psychedelic space?
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, when I play, harmonica, flute, mouth harp, a bunch of things, and but when I play, I'm gone, and I see all the paths I can take with each note, It's almost like it goes from, one more linear ways of playing music to all of a sudden, wow, I've got all those opportunities to go and layer. The other thing, like if you play mouth harp, it's funny. I'm just staring at one right here. If you play mouth harp, you can like start doing some layering and also activate parts of your throat that you wouldn't normally be able to activate, or it would take a lot more practice to activate without psychedelics. So I feel like Neo in the Matrix when I play music. It's like, wow, I can see everything, and then you can connect with the elements. One day I played a giant flute in an ayahuasca ceremony, and there was a big storm coming, and I tried to connect with it, and when a thunder struck, like a lightning struck, and I hit a high note at the same time, but it was completely like, and people were like, did this really happen? And, like at the end, you don't know if it really happened. And it's amazing. You don't try to question it. The harmonicas are particularly hard to get the sound, to capture the sound. So like, if you listen to yourself afterward, you really need good microphones set up properly to properly capture it. And so I've done recordings, and actually in our Sacred Creativity retreats, we did recordings for the guests so they could take them home. We didn't record the Icaros, but we recorded the music I did and that my friend did. And it's really hard. It's really hard to record music in a ceremonial setting, because placing the microphones and finding the right microphones and anticipating where people are going to be at and having somebody lucid enough to monitor the mic input. It's challenging. And I love the stress between the professional performance and the improv, because I see that in so many times. And what's interesting is if you go professional, you're working in a different headspace than if you're like if you're doing the same thing every time and trying to get that perfect, versus improvising and maybe drawing a different painting. For me, it's like painting. When I play the harmonica, I can actually see the painting that I'm drawing with the notes. I love music.
It's like jazz, right? Versus more structured. You can call it rock music or anything, right? I mean, it's just more structured, where jazz was just improvisational and played in the moment. And so that's very much what we're now. And I'd love to share more with you. It's something that I'm actually going to share. I'll actually send you, we have something called the Studio Womb as opposed to the Studio Room. And in the Studio Womb, we have some really interesting creations that I'll send over to you just to get your feedback.
Yeah, let's talk more afterward, because I think we've got a lot to cover there.
Oh yeah, we got to edit.
No, this is awesome. I want to come back to leadership and the kind of, if you were to summarize some of the top lessons you've gained from those deeply spiritual experiences and your daily practice and all that, and like that you bring back into the way you lead now. I mean, there's love probably would be number one based on what I heard, but what are some of the other insights you've kind of gained and that's along the way?
I think how important listening is in an organization, like in terms of really listening to the people in the organization and being able to give them validation. That's big. So what I've learned is, as a leader, it's really up to you to ensure that your people aren't just listening, but feel validated, and that you're listening to them and validating whatever it is that they have, because that builds connections. And so this work has taken my company to soaring new levels, and taken us through a pandemic where the hospitality industry had shut down, and we were able to create so much with the empathic listening is key, and building teams that are there because they see something that they're achieving for themselves and the company is a conduit for that. And the only way to be able to do that is to bring people into an organization that they feel heard and they feel that they're a part of. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't structures there. As a matter of fact, I found that people work very well in structures. There was a time early on that I was kind of breaking down as many structures as I possibly could. And I was, saying, autonomy is key and all of that. And I realized, not everybody wants autonomy. Yeah. Some people really like structures. And how do you learn that? Well, it's not a one size fits all. So that goes back to the listening and understanding, people. And companies all of the time will bring in third parties or run different types of programming through to understand how, whether it's a DISC assessment or something like that. And they get all these data points, but the big data point they miss is what happens in real time when people are like, connecting with each other and collaborating with each other, what matters to people and all of that. So making that a really important part of the company in my world, more important than our revenue goals, which is key, has generated more revenue because people want to work there more. It's better for the health of the company. And ultimately your customers, the workforce, the vendors, the partners, that it eventually ripples through. And it's always in need of more polishing. Always. Every week, there's always something you can polish. And that's always a key to it. Yeah. So it's not a static situation. Yeah. Everything's dynamic and everything changes hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And so now you're bringing that to your business too, and you're doing coaching. Are you coaching other companies and helping them?
So I just completed a cohort with my alma mater, George Mason University. So they have something called a centership for Wellbeing. And so I've completed that. And I'm now actively working with companies to establish all sorts of different really interesting elements of their businesses, whether it's kind of redefining the role of leadership and how to really power up organizations that are now sort of missing important cultural elements in their organizations, and whether it's sales, whether it's operations, whether it's HR, really getting to know and being able to have these organizations work and run at their highest performance without burning out people. And the way that I found that you do that is by tapping into what passions they have, and then feeding those passions more through whatever it is that you're doing. So, and again, it's not something you can necessarily define here, but it's a new way of leading organizations.
Who are the people you usually work with within those companies that are taking the initiative to reach out to you?
The leaders.
The leaders.
Yeah, the leaders in the companies really are. A lot of the times it's new leadership. Okay. That has a different perspective on this sort of work. And right now there is, budgets are opening up for larger companies that really see the value in coaching and see the value in giving their employees and their teams access to this sort of work and these sort of outlets. Because it's just common sense. It's healthy for organizations. It's just, organizations often adopt different politics within an organization, and sometimes politics that often leads to toxicity, which is not good for any group. So the more that you invest in these sorts of services and give accessibility to people in your on your teams, the healthier your company is going to be. And I've just found that.
Yeah. Do you feel like they were always as open-minded to this approach? It feels like there's a shift. I'm hopeful there's more of a shift and it's going to continue. It's
not in the, I don't think it's a high priority, for a lot of companies, it's not necessarily a high priority item, but I think with the way that things have shifted in terms of remote work, in terms of hybrid work, in terms of the freelance economy taking off, and people no longer finding, the camaraderie or the the way the organization support is less attractive than the ability to be completely free and jump from organization to organization, right? So it's more important now than ever that, anyone in your company, whether it's your employees, vendors, investors, come together, and there's an ethos there that needs to be cultivated, and that changes as the market changes and the generation. And this is an ever evolving world that we live in, and for us to be able to navigate in this world, why not have these tools that have been cultivated for thousands of years, and they're available, and now they're accessible in a way that they hadn't been. And I'll say, kind of to close things out, I've seen leaders in companies of all sizes, Fortune 50 all the way to small startups, that are now taking on practices that 30 years ago were considered completely out of normal, and now these cutting edge practices are allowing those leaders to be trendsetters in their industries. And whether or not they publicly state that they're doing these, I happen to know that there's quite a lot of people out there that are highly involved and understand the power behind psychedelics and behind transformation in terms of their careers and their business lives.
Yeah. Is it just psychedelic? I mean, I'm assuming it's not just psychedelic. And what I'm saying, it's like, you've got yoga, meditation, microdosing, which is psychedelics, and full blown psychedelics, retreat. I mean, they've got, it's like biohacking.
Exactly.
I'm hoping it helps get the enlightenment that the leaders are seeking. They might be getting them at the beginning to try to fit more on their plate or to hit some goals. But I think what they'll find out is it will create some awakening in the process.
Well, that's it. That's it, right? There was actually an interesting conversation I had with a friend of mine that runs that's actually building a 5-star resort that's going to have access to plant medicine, which is very interesting. It's not necessarily marketed to people that are, looking for plant medicine or anything like that. But the idea is that you have, two people in a restaurant, or like a couple in a restaurant that just finished a hiking, sort of trail, and they're kind of eating it, having a really good dinner, and the couple next to them that's hugely relatable. Well, they just completed an ayahuasca ceremony the day before. So a conversation starts, and suddenly questions are asked. That's it. And see what happens. Look, it's just it's an option that's available.
Yeah. And
it's a powerful option. And we know there's a residue that remains after, that is something that is very, very positive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they got to do the integration work, and
that's right.
They got to do the work. I mean, that's funny.
Do the work.
There's
it's
the hard
not a
work.
One and done.
Yeah, there's the hard work of the ceremony, and then there's the hard work after the ceremony.
That's right. That's a big part of it too. We're not talking, in a world of quick fix and one and dones. That's not what this is. You will feel good potentially. You may feel bad, but if you commit to the long-term work, more likely than not, you will discover things, and you'll be able to create a quality of life that you didn't necessarily know was attainable.
Yeah. So for the people who work with you, how long are the engagements usually, or how do they usually engage with you?
Yeah. So we do engage. The engagements are anywhere from 3 months to 24 months. And they go anywhere from those that are coming, completing a psychedelic journey or experience, or someone who's not interested in psychedelics at all, but they just want to begin to create rituals in their lives to achieve a certain goal. So what we'll do is we'll talk to our clients initially, understand what it is that they want to achieve, and then build a program to get them there. And not necessarily the psychedelic method, but there could be many methods that they get there. And what's very, very interesting is there's a massive community now, and you mentioned Third Wave and others, where we can reach out to people all over the world with all sorts of different facilitators and coaches and connectors and therapists, and breathwork healers. So the community is there, and so it's less about it's more about supporting as a community, and less about having sort of a one size fits all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Good. Let's see. We've touched on a lot. There's one question. I don't know if you answered it. I do have this little form that I send people beforehand. And I asked them if they were to capture the essence of leadership in a totem, in an animal, or in a plant, what would that be? And I don't think he answered that one. So I'm really curious.
Let's see, in an animal or a plant or some sort of living being.
It could be, some people pick mushrooms. Some people have picked elk. I've had birds. So I'm curious what you would pick if you think a sense of leadership.
A sense of leadership. I think I would pick. I think I would pick a field that is very nourished, like a very green pasture, with a large tree that provides shade. And in this pasture, it's very fertile, and there's opportunities to be able to create in the pasture, or lay down, or climb, or if need to be, take shade. But the pasture is just so fertile, and there's so much abundance of opportunity in that particular pasture. You could create a shed if you wanted to on one side of the pasture. You could potentially, because it's so fertile, you could plant in the pasture and reap lots and lots of fruits or vegetables or what have you. Or if you wanted to kind of take a break from all of that because there's the hot sun or the rain, then there's a tree that you can go under and provide shade when that happens. And I just thought about this now, but the first thing I thought of was, if you're a leader, just like providing a space for people to be able to create on, right? So that's there. And then in that space, have it be fertile so that things can be, planted and manifested there, and then provide, some sort of shade, some sort of protection when needed, right? Some sort of comfort when needed. And just make sure it's fertile, and make sure the grass is green and it's taken care of. There's no litter, right? So I would make sure that, my little grass place there. Hopefully people aren't partying too much and, peeing all over the grass. But if they do, there's nothing wrong with that, because it'll eventually turn into something else. So
no, it's like you're the gardener. Do you garden?
Well, I live in sort of an urban environment right now, so I don't have a garden, but I do. I have many plants, and actually we have peppers out back right now. So we're growing all sorts of different peppers and different vegetables. So I wouldn't call myself a gardener yet, though. I think my partner is purchasing soil on a pretty regular basis, and she can understand like the different soils, and so now I would consider her more of a gardener at this point. But I'm learning from her.
Well, there's a lot to learn from gardening, and I love that you took this image, because it's just, it's just taking care of that community, the plant, enriching that field. But also, I think there's a big part, which is the elements that you don't have control over.
That's right.
There's certain season, but there's also flux, and so as leadership, you have to deal with that, right? And
that's right.
So it's beautiful.
The weather may change, and the grass, has to find ways to continue to grow, and it grows, and it nourishes.
Yeah, good. We're approaching the end. I don't know how that happened, but it happened quickly. I think we just talked about dentist quite a bit, so that's probably how it happened. That and music. If we start talking music, we could make 2 hours easily. Do you have any other subjects, topics you wanna talk about, or questions you did ask me on the podcast before?
I'm sure I do, but I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Oh, it's good. Where can people find you?
So you can, I mean, if you just go to my website, it's alexatwood.com. That's where most of my offerings are. And my company is called Gravy Work. It's right now we're based on the East Coast from Florida all the way up through New York. So you can take a look at the company. It's an interesting product that we've built out there, and it really is made for to support those on in the service industry, and that's what my career has been for a long time. And coming soon, we'll have something called Gentle Jack Jones, which is going to be a very interesting foray into the ceremonial world using some instrumentation that you may have not heard before. So that's coming soon.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm looking for Gentle Jack Jones.
Gentle Jack Jones.
I love it. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the acronyms here. If there's something behind that.
GJJ, yeah.
GJJ.
Coming soon.
I love it. Coming soon. So people watch for Gentle Jack Jones coming soon.
Gentle Jack Jones coming soon.
And this podcast will probably come out in a month or so. So I don't know how soon it is. How soon is soon?
Well, we have the Alchemist. I forgot the Alchemist Lounge. Come check out the Alchemist Lounge. I just interviewed the current mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is where the office took place.
The office in Biden.
Yes, exactly. And I'm having some musicians. That's right, Biden's from there. That's his hometown. That's a good point. And I have some pretty interesting musicians coming on too. From Rat Dog, a band that I've been following for a while. Jay Lane's coming on, and hopefully getting some other really good folks on there. So this is an awesome interview. You asked some incredibly thought-provoking questions. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Alex. And I'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, follow me on Instagram at Psychedelics, or stop by my website and say hi at fooyad.com. That's Fooyad. There's a lot going on, and I'd love to hear from you all, the listeners that tune in every week. And if you have suggestions for future guests, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm there, and I'd love to get more guests on the show. Thank you. Have a great day.